Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Warcraft news. Well, Shadowlands Alpha has sort of appeared, and Blizzard seem to be making actually very wise changes to the game itself, so we've got a lot to talk about today. First though, Patreon, it's Orc and Shaman month today. You'll get all this great art plus the Shaman pin once the coronavirus-related closures have ended. Now, it is the best way to help us out. It is massively helpful, so a big thanks to all of our patrons, and with that, let's get into the news. Well, we're having a very interesting change on live. Blizzard seem to have actually listened to us with horrific visions. So first up, they're going to be removing the 5-vessel limit, and that means you'll be able to store, loads of visions at once, which is pretty good. Now, you might be wondering why that even matters if you feel like you can only get like 3 or 4 a week. Well, unless you've been saving them up actively, this also seems to be paired with another change that they're going to be making, and that is that Blizzard are increasing the coalescing vision drop rate from assaults and daily quests. Now, this is all going to be implemented in the next reset, and right now we actually don't know how much of an increase that is going to be. And then just catch-up-wise, you're actually going to be able to get 4 torn pages per run by clearing all 4 of the areas. Now, the lost pages for the later on stuff, you can still only get those from the lost areas, though. So, overall here, we've yet to see how much this will impact the game, but I think it does mean that one thing is very, very clear. Blizzard want people to do more visions, and I think for us the question is why. If I examine my own gameplay, well, I've stopped doing dailies. I don't care. I only do assaults, visions, and raiding. Now, the thing is, right now that means I can only do like 2 visions a week. Now, that sucks because I love visions, but at the end of the day, I don't love visions enough to spend all of that time doing all of the dailies. Now, even after this change, they're still going to be tied together, but just getting more resources from the assaults, that will lessen the importance of the dailies, which, I mean, look, given the dailies and the world content of 8.3, I think that being less important is a good thing. And I suspect here that this is Blizzard, seeing people dropping off doing the 8.3 daily content, and maybe even the assaults, and maybe Blizzard getting a bit worried. I think they likely know, though, that visions are super fun and that their progression actually has got a lot in it, so I imagine this is all just done, like, in order to stem the tide a bit. I think it's a good change, absolutely, and I think it's one that also reveals how just strange and imbalanced 8.3 is as a patch. Now, I guess another angle here is that most people will have Gift of the Titans by now, so, I mean, hey, what's to lose by giving people more access, I guess? I mean, sure, it'll lead to more people getting sockets, but I don't think that's the largest concern ever. So, for me, this will alleviate core problems with the gameplay loop of patch 8.3, and it will allow me to focus on the stuff that I've been the most interested in, which is progressing on visions. And now that I've been doing a few full clears and I've got access to my first mask, I'm actually looking quite forward to progressing through that system. Then also on a final note here, Blizzard are also doing a class balance wave. This is going to bring a 3 to 5% damage buff to Marksmanship, Windwalker, Frost, Enhancement Shamans, and Demonology Warlocks, as well as a raid healing buff to Resto Druids. So overall, seems like pretty good stuff. Anyway, with that, let's talk about Shadowlands Alpha. So Shadowlands Alpha is almost here. Blizzard have updated the Battle.net app to support Shadowlands Alpha. It is encrypted though, right? And that means that we cannot actually data mine it. But, I mean, from this, we can assume that Alpha, it's actually going to hit pretty soon. Now, I doubt it's going to be this week or next week, but I do think it will be quite soon, likely early March or very, very late February. It's about time. I mean, like with Blackwing Lair being out and 8.3 also being out, there's really nothing like in the horizon for World of Warcraft. Now, thinking about the testing period itself, if it's like test phases of the past, we'll probably see Blizzard open up the zone slowly over time, and then beta will kick off once they're all open. Now, look, Blizzard sure do have a lot to cover with this testing period, I think especially in the systems and the class design front. I mean, on the class design, like, Holinka is back to lead the class design there, which is quite interesting, and while a Legion-like revamp is not happening, they do want to add in the class identity, so hopefully they do that. Maybe they'll loosen up the BFA GCD restrictions. I mean, there's also Covenants, which I think they're going to require a massive amount of testing. They're essential to Shadowlands endgame progression as presented in BlizzCon because of the abilities and that stuff. And that does mean that Covenants, if they go by the BlizzCon plan, they will be a make or break feature that will impact the gameplay experience of the expansion massively. So personally, I just really hope that the power there is very light touch. and that the Covenants are more about like taking players on a journey, giving them loads of content and loads of customization for their character, rather than, that I almost think it's like a perversion of gameplay first. Like, gameplay first is a pillar of Blizzard. It's like one of the things they've actually got written down outside their campus, but sometimes I think the gameplay doesn't need to be tied into everything, and for a lot of people, the customization, the emotional experience, the attachment to their character is the gameplay. And maybe, say, if Garrisons were a bit more close to a customizable house system, and therefore didn't have all of that gameplay attached to them, maybe it would have been a less disruptive and more successful feature that an entire expansion didn't hinge upon. Now, going back to the logistics, access-wise, alpha is usually pretty limited, then beta does become a good bit more open. Not an open beta, just, more people. Now, I do expect Blizzard to take this one seriously. I really do think that. A lot of feedback was taken into consideration with Legion, but a lot less with BFA. And I think it's very clear to everybody just how that actually turned out for the game. I think Blizzard also know that. For our part, we're going to have to be just working as hard as we can to provide actionable feedback on the game, and to also find out like what are your topics of interest and the things that you want to see and maybe not to see in the game. I think there's a massive opportunity to get this testing period right, and I really do think it's one that we've got to take. I know that in an ideal world, like, I wouldn't be saying any of these things and it would all just be normal and good, but realistically, I mean, we do all love World of Warcraft. We all do want it to be in a healthy state, and the best way that we can do that is, well, to provide as good feedback as we can. We do, though, have to talk about dates, so let's get back to the logistics. If this hits early March and we've got a 6-month testing period, then you could expect Shadowlands to be releasing in September. Right now, I think we're a tad behind schedule as compared to BFA and Legion, so that's a little bit rough, but even in the testing period, you do have to remember that Legion's technically was extremely long, but it started very early, and it only contained at that point the Demon Hunter starter zone, and they ended up having a break for Christmas, so overall, I think it's more about the quality of the beta test than the duration. 6 months of active feedback, listening, and iteration, that is worlds better than 6 months of stuff being thrown on beta with no max level premates and little communication. And that unfortunately was the case for the BFA beta testing period. So yes, overall, what matters the most, I would actually say, is that max level test period. That's where BFA was hit the hardest, right? Because the only max level premates that were on BFA beta were the PvP server, and they had very heavy restrictions. They couldn't actually leave a certain area of Borealis, and this meant that testing classes at endgame just wasn't really that feasible because there weren't even proper target dummies for those characters. And the same even goes for things like Azerite gear at max level. That's really what killed BFA beta, and I think this is a mistake that Blizzard must not repeat this time. So look, if we get those premates and we get good dev communication, I do anticipate things being in a better state. That said, there is a little bit of Blizzard stubbornness that always crops up and always does worry me. Things that led to, say, Azerite reforging being kept in, essences not being account-wide. It's weird. Sometimes I can understand sticking to your guns and think that something is the right call philosophically, but I think there are times when Blizzard have to be able to pivot when the going is rough. I think it's just a degree of pragmatism that's sometimes needed when, at the end of the day, you just have to look and realize, oh, our plan's not working. Now, that said, there are a bunch of ways where Shadowlands already seems to improve in BFA. I mean, even if the weekly box system, has its problems, well, in Shadowlands, if you get multiple choices from your weekly box, that at least will remove a bunch of pain points, AP is gone, and anima power will have a weekly cap in terms of player power, so that infinite grinding stuff will also be gone. Now, sure, I am worried about being pigeonholed into certain covenants, and I'm worried about the conduit component of the soulbind system, but those are things that can be iterated upon. I mean, Legion had a lot of issues in its beta, but overall, I mean, it even had problems in life, but it was overall fun enough to actually overcome a lot of those things. I think if Shadowlands can find that fun and quash a bunch of pain points, then yes, it could be significantly better than BFA, and I mean, I suppose it kind of has to be. Overall, it's all down to beta. Blizzard, I will help you in any way I can. I'm sure that most of the people watching this video actually do want this game to go in a good direction, and they are rooting for you. Just Blizz, be open, be flexible. It's a live game, and I think BFA shows that the player experience is king, and it's just about living in reality. Sometimes plans don't work, and they do just require a bit of a pivot, a bit of a change, but if that change is made, guess what? It actually can have really good results. And then next up, and in a similar theme, we've got the Classic PTR. This is a sort of interesting one, as Classic hasn't really needed a PTR thus far. Now, personally, I think this could be for a few things, right? Classic has had the odd problem through its short life, so, I mean, this quite simply could just be a way for Blizzard to, you know, live test the new phases before they actually hit the main servers. Alternatively, though, it could be them setting up a test platform that will last them well into the future, maybe even leading to a Classic Plus or a TBC/Wrath server. But, I mean, that's really just speculation. Right now, though, we just don't know all that much, and I imagine we're not going to know Blizzard's wider plans until we're past Naxxramas, maybe BlizzCon 2020. And then next up, we've got a rather interesting bit of Blizz news. So, they reportedly are working on animated series for the Overwatch and Diablo franchises with Netflix. Now, this appeared in the LinkedIn page of, I think, Nick Van Dyke, who leads Activision Blizzard Studios. Now, this is not official information, it was just on the guy's LinkedIn profile, but the profile does note that they are both in pre-production and they're both for Netflix. Now, look, it's a pretty natural fit for Blizzard. You know, Diablo's got a big open world, but a pretty light story, so there's room there. Overwatch is essentially all transmedia narrative content, so yeah, I mean, it makes sense. A part of me thinks that a similar treatment would be ideal for World of Warcraft. I think marketing-wise, it absolutely would be, but then if I think about it, you know, a bit deeper, if the big goal is to have one big cohesive world, then I do think as much of the narrative content should go into the game as is possible. Now, that being said, if you're maybe doing prequel content, that could work a little bit better. Maybe a, you know, War of the Ancients 10-part animated series or like a side story to the Warcraft franchise. I think that stuff could be incredible and likely would not tread on the main game's turf. Now, as to whether Blizzard will do these in-house or if it will be outsourced, it's hard to tell. To be honest with you, I don't imagine Blizzard will have the resources to do this all in-house, so it's probably going to be a collaboration between them and another studio, which, by the way, is 100% the norm for that industry. So overall, it's exciting stuff. And if we're going to hear more, I imagine it'll be BlizzCon, or maybe because it's TV related, say Comic-Con. Anyway, there you go. That is it for the Warcraft news. A surprisingly beefy one, right? Like, actually good changes for the game, letting us do more visions if that's what we want to do, and at the very least letting us upgrade our cloak a little bit faster if that's what we want to do. So that's really good stuff. And yeah, Shadowlands Alpha is probably going to be within the next month. That's exciting. There'll be a lot of work to do, but I'm very excited to do it. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you very much for watching today's video. And with that, I'll see you next time.
Mm-hmm.